Hi, I'm Matt Reardon. It's September 18th. I want to talk about quite a few things in the video today, namely the tropics are heating up a bit. I'm really frankly focused less on the Atlantic, more thinking about the West Pacific, potentially forecast for two impressive typhoons, which could help to stir up what has been the stagnant pattern across the continental U.S. with the jet stream well up into Canada, these kind of lingering upper level lows beneath it. We haven't seen a lot of frost risk this September. I think that's going to continue to be the case, but we have to watch those typhoons to see how they might influence the Pacific jet stream and kick out this pattern that has been kind of situated across the area. If we look across the radar mosaic, we can see the other stories unfolding, this upper level trough that we have been talking about. I mentioned that stagnant pattern. We've been talking about this upper level trough spinning across the continental US since like the beginning of last week. It's Thursday of this week, sounding like a broken record, still just kind of watching this slowly meander west to east across the country. We'll talk about that today. The precipitation starting to move into some drought-stricken areas in the central part of the country here, but then the remnants of Mario. If you look over in like California, and that is anomalous rainfall for late September. So Mario has thrown up a lot of moisture. We have to talk about that and the forecast for rain across California, Arizona, even like New Mexico over the next 48 hours. Otherwise, again, not much frost risk to talk about. And we'll look well out into the forecast to peek at that. But I do want to mention La Niña, what's likely to be maybe a weaker La Niña this fall and winter, and what that might mean for the forecast versus, say, like a moderate or strong La Niña. So we're going to go back and look at some analogs to kind of help key us in on what kind of fall and winter we might be staring down as a result of that. Before we do all of that, just want to do a quick touch on last 24 hours of precipitation. We can already see Mario has brought rainfall into San Diego up near a quarter inch. That upper level trough spinning across the central plains, you can tell that it has this kind of cutoff look to it because it's, like just here. There's not a lot of rainfall to the north, the south, the west, or the east. You can see how slow moving it is. That this is just the only areas where we recorded rain yesterday. And what's kind of neat about this is you can kind of place where the low was over the last 24 hours because you can see the rain bands kind of spiraling around it. Do you see that kind of signature there? So we can tell the low's like been right in there. It's kind of neat to see. That's going to be slowly pushing east through the forecast period here. Some showers and storms down in the Florida Peninsula, and then this kind of hybrid low that we had spinning off Carolina, and then the mid-Atlantic yesterday bringing some rainfall into this area here. That's quickly moved kind of out of the way east of like Massachusetts, where it brought just a little bit of measurable precip, but quickly moving out of the area of like our forecast concern at this point. My focus, at least starting out today, is really on California. If we look over at the ECMWF forecast, this is a precipitable water forecast, particularly an anomaly to tell us where this moisture is anomalously strong for the date. And you can see that the remnants of Mario throwing up a lot of that tropical moisture into the atmosphere. And that's now on the doorstep of California here this morning, helping to bring those rain chances across a wide area of the state here, running up against those coastal ranges. I'll play the forecast forward through today. You can see that moisture plume just getting up into the Central Valley later today into Friday morning before kind of moving out of the area through Friday and into Saturday. But this is going to be a pretty impressive rainfall event for the area. Just looking at the 3-kilometer NAM forecast for radar here this morning, those showers over Southern California, those will move north through the day, open to like the Central Coast, Los Angeles Valley, Oxnard, Santa Maria area. Perhaps some thunderstorms in the lower Colorado River Valley today. Can't rule out, maybe even some small hail and wind. See some of those spinning down here near like Imperial and Yuma over toward eastern Arizona. Tonight, getting to like dinner time, additional rainfall, potentially some thunder across the San Joaquin Valley. Can't rule out something getting near like San Francisco. And then up into the Sierra foothills overnight tonight. And then maybe spinning up into the North Valley tomorrow. Some of the models in disagreement on how much rain gets past like Sacramento. So you go up into the North Valley. But tomorrow, additional showers and storms possible across like eastern Arizona and portions of New Mexico. So pretty rare event to see this much rainfall. I mean, we're forecasting well over an inch from the 3-kilometer NAM for some of these coastal areas. And an impressive lower Colorado River Valley rainfalls here through this area here. And this is an area that might record 4 to 5 inches of rain in a year. Some years less than that, and forecasting, up near an inch. That's like 20% of their annual rainfall over the next 24 hours. The National Weather Service, the Weather Prediction Center, putting out kind of a much coarser forecast for rain as they often do, kind of capturing all scenarios here. But again, anywhere from like a half inch in the lower Colorado River Valley up near an inch, over toward the Central Coast, anywhere from like a half inch up to an inch, depending on where we're at in terms of elevation. And then impressive forecast for the San Joaquin Valley, Bakersfield near a half inch, up toward like Modesto, that area near a half inch. But between that, like Delano near Fresno, getting up over a half inch of rainfall for late September is pretty impressive. Sierra foothills included on some of that, and then all the way over to Arizona, portions of western and central New Mexico as well. I do quickly want to touch on we might have another disturbance behind it develop. A lot of the initial models kind of taking the system west, where it would kind of lessen the chance that that moisture plume returns back up into California like late next week, but it is a possibility. So we could be doing this again maybe next week, just kind of a remote possibility at this point, but with another system trying to develop behind it. It is worth keeping an eye on. I want to turn our attention back to maybe the central U.S. I talked about that upper level trough earlier. Still spinning across like Montana, South Dakota, in toward Nebraska here. Some kind of multiple areas of spin in the upper atmosphere. We're looking at the 500 millibar jet stream at this point. And I do want to point your attention to the fact that the polar jet stream has been living well up here over the last few weeks. That has kept kind of these meandering troughs underneath it. But if we look to the top of the screen, we do have a bit more vigorous Pacific jet stream coming in. And that is going to be our weather maker, our precip maker across much of the central United States next week. So as much as I've been talking about this like a broken record over the last 7 days, it's really this system that we're going to have to keep an eye on next week. It has a little bit more juice in it. You can just see that coming out of the North Pacific. So we're going to have to talk about that in the forecast in just a second here. I do want to touch on that upper level trough here today, kind of spinning again over the central plains. I'm going to take this forecast from the 3 kilometer NAM in through this morning, this afternoon, where we could see some showers and storms over Missouri and Kansas. Some of those getting into, again, some very dry acreage tonight, late Thursday into early Friday morning. Iowa, Minnesota, Eau Claire area down through like Fayetteville, Arkansas, into eastern Oklahoma. Some showers and storm chances before tomorrow. Finally, like tomorrow afternoon, getting into eastern Iowa, southern Minnesota, southern Wisconsin, and then finally into like northern Illinois. Perhaps weakening precipitation signal down into like the middle Mississippi River Valley. Some chances all the way through like Memphis before some of that rainfall lingers into early Saturday morning from the 3 kilometer NAM here. I'm going to try to update. This was the 0Z run. Oh yeah, there is the 6Z run. So let's play that forward through this morning. We're kind of redoing the forecast here. A little bit better precipitation signal through central Missouri, central Iowa here late tonight. Tomorrow morning, there's that kind of Fayetteville, southern Mississippi signal tomorrow morning on Friday. Additional showers and storms up through the North Dakota area. And then waiting tomorrow for Illinois and southern Wisconsin to see by tomorrow afternoon if we can get storms forming along like I-55 down through central Illinois up into Wisconsin here. And again, that less confident precip signal down through the middle Mississippi River Valley. At least, portions of Illinois, Missouri, eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin getting in on some of this precipitation from this upper level trough that we've been talking about for a while here. And see that kind of spinning if we just look at the 500 millibar vorticity. That vorticity is shaded here in this kind of yellow to blue coloring here. And we can see that moisture plume associated with the remnants of Mario there. That's going to be spinning around as we go through Friday and then Saturday. You can see there's different pieces to it. Maybe even on Sunday, additional chance of rainfall coming through this area. We'll look at that in a second from the ECMWF. But as I play that forecast forward, you see this piece here. This is Monday of next week all the way out to the 22nd. I'm going to reverse this quickly, but keep an eye on that lobe of vorticity, that shortwave trough, as it comes off the Pacific associated with those strong jet stream level winds that we saw, comes across British Columbia, and then dives into the central U.S., Kansas, Oklahoma, amplifies as it crosses the Continental Divide. That's not uncommon. Before situating again, like right over Fayetteville, near Springfield, Missouri. And this is late Tuesday into Wednesday now. And this is going to be a big precip maker in this quarter here, especially if it just parks itself here for 24 to 48 hours. Again, indicative of this stagnant pattern. The flow, that polar jet's still way up here, almost off screen at this point. So these upper level lofts just get caught underneath and they just spin very slowly, not a lot to move them out of there with that flow well to the north. So we kind of talk about the stagnant flow as being drought prone, but it can be flood prone when these upper slowly moving cutoff flows get stuck underneath them and the areas outside of it go dry. The areas underneath go wet. We saw that just looking at the last 24 hours of precip, right? So now if we jump over, put it all together with the ECMWF precip, today, tomorrow, I'm walking this through quickly. We already talked about the west precip, but we can see as we go through the day Saturday, additional rainfall chances from Oklahoma up through eastern Kansas, portions of western Missouri into Wisconsin. And then Sunday morning, additional chances over Illinois, Missouri, through Oklahoma. Getting even to Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. On Sundays, this upper level trough continues to push east. And by Monday, that next system's right about here in Montana, but we're still dealing with the remnants of that slow-moving upper level trough over Illinois, over Missouri, Arkansas, toward Memphis, now getting into Ontario, West PA, Eastern Ohio, upstate New York. This is now Monday. Here comes that next upper level trough. Remember, that's when it was careening into this area here. Increasing rainfall chances. We even get a low pressure system here near Kansas City. And then again, Arkansas all the way from northeast Texas up into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. Next week, this is Tuesday now. I mean, just parked here. Now getting into Wednesday morning, and again, just sitting over the same area. So Indiana, now Ohio. I mean, just decent chances over a wide area here that has been building drought classifications over the last 2 or 3 weeks as this upper level low just sitting here. Now, other areas are going dry, around that upper level low, because there's not a lot of flow connect to it. It's not moving through quickly west to east. It's just kind of meandering pretty slowly. If we put this together in the precipitation anomalies over the next 5 days, we see the influence of the current trough number 1, parked across the central U.S., getting into Illinois, certainly Wisconsin. We talked about that this weekend. Through Arkansas into northeast Texas, there's that California precip that we talked about. That system's coming on shore now in the 5 days, but if we take it out to 7, the upper level low starts to move east into western PA, eastern Ohio, trying to get into upstate New York, into Tennessee, Kentucky, early next week out through the 25th. And then the 4 to 10 days, that upper level low has now dived back in. And a lot of this precip you see here is new precipitation in the forecast because we're taking it just 4 to 10 days out at this point. And a wide area here all the way through Michigan, down through the southeast into Florida. In an area in here that has been pretty dry, significantly dry in some cases. If we put it all together in the 10-day, I mean, this is just, again, indicative of that stagnant pattern. There's the potential California precip, plenty here underneath the influence of those upper level troughs, but drier almost everywhere else outside of it, with that proper flow running further to the north of all of it. We've been talking about that lack of momentum. We can measure global angular momentum here, and it has been low. The anomaly has been in the deficit here, and it's expected to continue at least through like early October at this point. So we might not be shaking this kind of stagnant pattern for a while. It reduces the frost chance, but it does increase the chance, strangely, kind of counterintuitively, for drought in some areas and higher precipitation with those stagnant upper level lows in other. I mentioned that lack of frost risk associated with that. If we look at maximum temperatures here forecasted, these daytime highs from the NDFD, that's National Weather Service product, lower underneath the influence of that upper level trough. We're talking like 60s and 70s, but certainly no frost risk overnight in any of these areas. Underneath the influence of that Mario moisture in California, 80s and 90s across California. We take the forecast out Friday, Saturday. I mean, look at the warmth. Montana in the 80s, 80s across the entire Midwest, the central U.S., save for like Minnesota and Wisconsin. But even into Monday and Tuesday, when we're raining on some of these areas, we're relatively warm for late September. I mean, all the way from eastern Washington to Maine. A little bit cooler on the coastline. We're looking at an upper level low next week that might bring, I mentioned, return some showers and storm chances to like northern California, maybe bringing the temperatures down there. But even out through Wednesday, just impressive, widespread, stagnant warmth across late September. If we jump over and look at the minimum temperatures next Wednesday, like Wednesday morning, I mean, everybody in line for a anomalously warm overnight temperature. Almost zero frost risk through the 7 to 10 day forecast at this point. You cannot find the frost risk at this point. I tried to find it even like in Canada, looking at the ECMWF ensembles, the probability that we'd touch below 32 degrees Fahrenheit in the forecast. Okay, in like Greenland and like Baffin Island, we're getting there. But I mean, it's late September. We've seen early frost well into the continental U.S. at this time before. And I'm taking this forecast out, looking at these probabilities, like 27th, 28th. I'm going to ignore the Rockies here. And I mean, not even getting into like the Peace River area of Alberta. I mean, we're out into like early October. We're getting close to like the median frost date for some areas in the Midwest at this point, and just no frost whatsoever to talk about it. It's getting pretty impressive at this point. I just went to like Spencer, Iowa to look at the year-to-date temperatures to put it in perspective. So what we're looking at here is the daytime highs. On the top bar of the little candlestick here on the bottom was that day's respective overnight minimum. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because I know that looks a little small. And again, this is just northwest Iowa, but trying to capture like the central U.S. here. And we saw some warmth earlier this year in June. Saw periods of warmth through the summer, kind of at the peak heating. But you can see just how anomalous this increase in temperatures has been lately, particularly these overnight lows, which have just jumped well off our typical average overnight low, at least for northwest Iowa. You can see we were well below that in the cool down of early September and like the middle of August. You can see how far we jumped off. I mean, it's almost as much impressive, anomalous warmth as we had like all the way in like the middle of June that we've seen build in here of late. And if we go looking for a change in the forecast from like the AIFS, for example, which does pretty well in that like 8 to 14 day range, I'm taking this trough ridge forecast out to like Tuesday of next week. There's that little shortwave that we talked about, bringing precipitation chances to the middle Mississippi River Valley and the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. Next week, ridging to the north of it, keeping that warmth across Canada, right? We talked about the frost up in Baffin Island, not in Alberta. But even taking the ECMWF AIFS forecast out, more troughing in the Gulf of Alaska, off British Columbia, better rainfall for that area, maybe northwest Washington. This is like all the way out into the 30th. And even getting out in October. I mean, if this low stays here, we're going to be warm downstream of it. It's just how it works. And there's just no frost risk in this forecast right now. Unless this low sneaks up and dives across, it's going to be hard pressed to get cooler temperatures in here. If we do jump over and look at the ECMWF ENS forecast for the 8 to 14 days, so getting a little bit further out, even toward October 1st at this point, this is going to capture some of the remnants of next week's slow moving trough over the middle part of the country. You can see that there, the influence in the Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, the middle Mississippi and lower Mississippi River valleys. We're staying dry outside of that upper level low. You can see that here. But we're starting to see, as that upper level trough magnifies there west of British Columbia, it's bringing better flow over this area here. So that's why getting out toward the end of the month, you see increased precipitation for the Willamette Valley, western Washington just kind of slowly picking up there. But again, lacking significant flow through this area means we're still drier outside the influence of these upper level troughs. If we look at the ECMWF forecast for temperatures, I took this, I'll take it back to the beginning quickly. We know what this forecast is: warm across much of Canada and the continental U.S. over the next 5 days. 5 to 10 days, you can see the influence of that trough here across the middle part of the country, bringing some cooler area in behind it for the high plains, but otherwise warm across much of the continental U.S., even North America. And we start to finally cool off a little bit in Western Canada. I mean, not considerably so, but just getting back toward like seasonal, getting from the 27th out through October 2nd, but still warm through much of the eastern 2/3 of the continent at this point. But maybe the beginnings of a frost risk developing in early October that we've been talking about, just as like it's got to change at some point. That's not a good forecast methodology, but at this point, with how persistent this warmth has been, you're starting to look for signs of this pattern kicking out. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, my focus has been somewhat on the West Pacific. And if we jump over, we can see 2 areas of investigation that we're keeping our eye on: 90 West and 91 West. Both are expected to develop into a typhoon, and we can see that on the ECMWF forecast here. So here's that first area, 90 West, east of the Philippines, and there's another area we're going to see pop up here quickly in the forecast. There it is. And as I take this forecast forward from the European model, both of these developing quickly into typhoons. This one here well east of Japan, this one here northeast of the Philippines, hopefully missing land as it sneaks through that gap between Taiwan and the Philippines here. And that's, down to 950 millibars, down to 970s. Those are typhoons at this point, even getting down to like 943. Could be an issue for like southeast China. And we're waiting to see if these will excite the jet stream. And even this one moving toward Japan, pretty strong, now down to 945 millibars. That would be like a major hurricane over in the Atlantic. And it does. By like September 28th, we start to see an impressive jet stream response in the Pacific while we're having that ridging continue across North America. We finally see how it starts to aggravate the jet stream. Right? It helps to produce another one of these troughs across Alaska, but at least from this forecast from the ECMWF, causes what we call one of these anticyclonic wave breaks, fancy term for a big ridge that kind of folds over on itself, and that would start in early October to kick out some of the warmth up in Canada, kick some of that out of, or push that in here and kick some of the cooler temperatures that have maybe been slowly developing later in the month into the continental U.S. Again, that is 360 hours from now. So we're talking 13 to 15 days, that scenario unfolding. I cannot say that's going to certainly happen with confidence. But if we do see a super typhoon develop east of Japan, gets absorbed into the jet stream, it is a scenario that we're going to have to watch in early October as a mechanism to bring some cold back into some of these areas of the central or eastern U.S. Just something to keep an eye on right now, given the forecast. Otherwise, if we look at the 8 to 14 day outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, no surprise to see widespread warmth, given that forecast across the continental U.S. from the 25th through October 1st. If we look at the precipitation forecast over that time period, clicked the wrong button. increasing wet signal with that upper level trough situated across the Gulf of Alaska and then pushing closer to British Columbia. Better flow across this region here with that ridging dominating across Canada and Ontario. Less precipitation here. That upper level trough, again, the 25th through October 1st that we talked about next week, kind of lingering weekly in this area here. But again, very little frost risk. If we look at the risk of hazardous temperatures from the 25th through the 1st, just a slight for warm temps, no frost risk essentially. We already kind of covered that. We are keeping one area of focus in the far eastern Atlantic as a wave comes off Africa. Of course, we'll have to talk about Gabrielle in just a second here. But again, both these systems I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, I'm not worried about them impacting the continental U.S. right now. On Tuesday, there was at least some chance that Gabrielle could sneak a little bit further west where we might have to watch it. But a lot of the recent forecast data keeps it at tropical storm strength for quite a while through this weekend before potentially developing into a hurricane. But even then, the cone keeping it very likely east of Bermuda, which would keep this a complete fish storm, which is how we prefer them, and less risk of this kind of west jog back toward the continental U.S. at this point. We do have that other system in the far eastern Atlantic that I'll talk about in just a second. Let's see. First, let's get Gabrielle, that satellite view there. Actually, it doesn't have any thunderstorm development around it now. I know this is kind of hard to see here, but I wanted to capture that next system that we're watching in the Eastern Pacific. Actually, it looks a lot more robust than Gabrielle, even though it doesn't have a name with it right now. And just given how weak Gabrielle looks and the forecast taking it more to the north at some point here, less of a concern. But I do want to jump over and look at the Eastern Atlantic here. This is the next system we're watching, but you can see pretty small, not one of these large waves. And it's got some continental Saharan air to deal with it early in its life that could dampen down development, which is why the National Hurricane Center has that just a 20% chance of formation associated with it. I mentioned at the beginning I wanted to do a bit of a thought experiment and look up some analogs for a La Niña winter. We're going into this one here. A lot of these latest seasonal forecasts, this one I'm just showing from the ECMWF that's forecasting that La Niña versus El Niño scenario. Much of these various members take us down into La Niña as we go through October toward the holidays. So like in this area here, you can see us getting down to like negative 0.75 degrees Celsius in the Central Pacific. That qualifies as a weak La Niña, not even down below -1 Celsius before starting to weaken that La Niña signature after the new year, January and February. So this would be indicative of kind of a weak La Niña that quickly weakens itself in the new year. And I went back, if this is the scenario that's going to play out, and these forecasts themselves are not perfect, even if we have to entertain the possibility that some of these might produce something of a stronger La Niña. We have to entertain the possibilities we might stay, a little bit closer to neutral, maybe even flirting but not achieving La Niña status, even though, by all intents and purposes, functionally the atmosphere is behaving very La Niña-like, I think, at the moment. But I went back and looked at all the winters where we had a weak La Niña that weakened fairly quickly in the new year, at least sticking with that kind of average ECMWF forecast that I just showed you. And so you can see all the winters at the top of the screen that I plugged in here. 24 to 25, actually our last winter was a weak La Niña, 17 to 18, 16 to 17, etc. And the temperature signal that came up from November to March, basically the whole winter, late fall to early spring, was very La Niña-like. And this is almost classic textbook, even with these weak La Niñas, where you're cooler here across the northern plains into parts of the upper Midwest and warmer across the southern tier of the country, rather seasonal in between. Now, this doesn't always mean super snowy in this area here, but it certainly means cooler, which would at least start to increase snow chances if you get into like this area here, where there's often a lot of precip, but battle zone, if you will. Always kind of a common term between that like rain, sleet versus snow, and then less wintry precip across the south. But again, there's exceptions to this every year. Certainly last year we saw the wild and ridiculous snowfall along the Gulf Coast. So these La Niña correlations are far from perfect. They do give us some sense of direction as to where we're going this year. Now that's just temperature. I wasn't surprised by the results of this, looking at these recent weak La Niñas, that it looks pretty textbook. But precipitation, a little bit more interesting, because we see Northern California, even the Sierra Nevadas, staying closer to average, if not above average here, even through like Oregon, eastern Washington, Idaho. We typically see this cutoff line with La Niña somewhere like here, with greater precipitation to the north, drier to the south. But you can see these weak La Niña years maybe keeping better precipitation chances into central, at least maybe Southern California, not as dry in these weak La Niña years. We've seen that and some other analogs that we've done for like San Diego this summer. we look across the northern plains, a little bit wetter than average. If you consider wetter plus cooler than average, probably snowier in this area here. That might be important because this is an area where we saw a snow drought last year. And then drier. I mean, look at the dry signal. I mean, this is maybe the biggest surprise that I saw. Dry all the way from the mid-Atlantic down through Florida. And considering that area has gone over a bit drier here in the forecast and of late, might have to keep an eye on this going through this winter, of an area where maybe not expecting as much drought initially, but showing up now on some of the analogs, all the way from like Boston through like Pensacola. Again, these correlations are never perfect, but certainly on this thought experiment, those are the brightest colors that have stood out in these recent week-long Niñas that we might be staring down this year. As I wrap up today, I want to mention one more tropical possibility. We have noticed in some of the long-range models, this one from the ECMWF ensemble here, I've taken this well out into the forecast here, so I'll put a big disclaimer on it, that some models try to spin up a system here in the Caribbean Sea that could get out into the Gulf of Mexico. This is like early October at this point. Now, I'm not calling this like a definitive forecast by any means, but we have seen some hints of this in the extended forecast from the ECMWF. We're trying to spin something up out of the Gulf late September, early October. Just something to keep an eye on as we go a little bit further out into the forecast here. I did mention that the ECMWF AIFS, which is an operational run, so not an ensemble, also spins up a very similar system under a different kind of model regime, again, out toward like September 30th. The 1st and the 2nd, where trying to get a storm into the middle of the Gulf, where it's always going to be a concern for us. Again, we're 330 hours out at this point. This is not a firm forecast by any means, just a possibility that we'll have to keep an eye on some of these long-range models as we get more data over the next week and the weekend. As for today, thanks for watching, and Eric, we'll talk with you all on Friday.